The morning fog draped itself lazily over the sprawling expanse of my 8-7-acre ranch, a gentle shroud that softened the edges of the world. The air, crisp and tinged with the earthy perfume of dew-kissed grass, invigorated my spirit as I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. This land was more than just property. It was legacy, my sanctuary from the buzzing chaos of city life. But serenity is a fragile thing. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the local homeowners association, had decided that her power extended far beyond the white picket fences of the suburban enclave she governed. Her first petty actions were almost amusing in their absurdity, like watching a small dog yapping at a passing freight train. She'd send letters typed in bold, demanding I repaint the barn, claiming its rustic red clashed with the HOA's color scheme. I had, of course, ignored her whims. My barn's color was as much a part of this land as the towering oaks that lined the pastures. I watched as she escalated her campaign, her fussy footnotes growing larger, her need for control untethered and wild. She fussed about imaginary property lines, complained about the noise of cattle lowing in the evening, and even had the audacity to send someone to inspect my fences as if I'd let them crumble into disrepair. It was almost endearing in its desperation, like a child throwing stones at the moon, believing gravity might forget its hold. And yet, I remained calm, silent as the dawn before a storm. I knew that the roots of my strength lay deeper than her shallow grasping. My response was measured, quiet, as I filed her letters away in a drawer, a paper trail of her misdeeds. Let her flail, I thought, while I tended to the soil, coaxing life from the earth with hands that knew its every contour. But the real blow came not from her petty grievances, but from something far deeper, insidious in its precision. The letter that changed everything arrived on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday, its contents as chilling as the February chill that seeped through my bones. It bore the seal of legality, claiming authority to sell the land beneath my feet, an act of betrayal wrapped in bureaucratic jargon. In that moment, I felt the ground shift, the sturdy foundation I had known all my life suddenly unstable. It was a mistake, surely, a farce that would be corrected with a simple conversation. But the world, it seemed, had other plans. I breathed deeply, grounding myself in the familiar sense of hay and earth. They could take the land on paper, perhaps, but they could never touch the life that pulsed within it, nor the memories that danced in the wind. Revenge, I mused, is often a dish best served with patience, and patience was something I had in abundance. I would not rage against the storm, but rather, I would wait for the winds to shift. I would watch, and when the time was right, I would let my actions speak with the quiet force of a gathering tide. And so, I returned to my work, my silent resolve echoing across the fields, a promise whispered to the land I loved. It would not be long before the balance of power would tilt. When that day came, Karen would discover what it truly meant to cross the wrong person. Till then, I'd let her believe she'd won, as I walked the boundary of my ranch, marking each step with a quiet, inexorable purpose. The air felt different now, stifled, as if the very molecules had been rearranged by Karen's relentless machinations. It was a subtle change, creeping in like fog over a sunlit valley, one that had become nearly palpable since the meeting where she revealed her next move. Her eyes glinted with a satisfaction that only tyrants know. She had not taken my silent resistance as defeat. No, she escalated, wielding the HOA's rulebook like a weapon forged in pettiness. Rules, absurd in their specificity, began raining down with the rhythm of a summer thunderstorm. My every footfall on the ranch felt monitored, each natural imperfection in the land now a potential violation. The terrain, once expansive and unjudgeable as the sky, was now held under the meticulous scrutiny of Karen's self-appointed reign. I received citations with the regularity of the morning sun, grass blades exceeding regulation height by inches, fences anointed with the wrong shade of brown. Even the unapproved chirping of birds seemed suspect under her watchful eye. Each citation was a featherweight on its own, but the accumulation had the force of a boulder pressing upon my patience. In the evenings, I would sit on the porch, the horizon stretching endlessly, but now marred by the invisible lines Karen had drawn. I could feel the whispers in the wind, carried from the town meetings and neighborhood gatherings, gossip, like a living thing, spread through the community, distorting the truth with each retelling. I was painted as the obstinate outsider, the one who refused to bow to the collective will, a villain in their suburban saga. Irony sat with me in those moments of quiet contemplation. This land, boundless and wild, now had its spirit shackled by the whims of a woman who understood neither its history nor its heart. But I remained calm, a quiet storm gathering strength beneath a placid surface. My mind, a disciplined battleground, plotted with precision rather than anger. Karen's strategy was clear: break the spirit, and the body would follow. Yet, she underestimated the resilience of roots that had dug deep into this soil long before the notion of an HOA existed. Her empire of control was built on sand, and I was the tide. I sought solace in the rhythms of the ranch, tasks that were as old as time. The land spoke a language of resilience, and it taught me patience. It whispered strategies in the rustle of leaves and the babble of the brook. I listened, absorbing its counsel with the diligence of a student. The legal process was a slow burn, a deliberate unfolding of events set into motion with a single lawsuit. It was a game of chess, and I moved my pieces with an unhurried grace, each motion calculated and precise. I kept my intentions cloaked, concealed beneath the mundane routine of life. The lawsuit was my knight on the board, poised to leap over her walls of control. As Karen's rules grew more ludicrous, the community's loyalty began to crack. Seeds of doubt were sown with each unreasonable edict, and I could see the shifting tides in their eyes, flickers of unrest in a sea of complacency. The irony was not lost on me. Karen's own ambition would be her unraveling. One evening, amid the cacophony of cicadas, a single line of dialogue broke the silence, uttered by a neighbor who had witnessed too much. Maybe this isn't what we signed up for. It was a whisper of rebellion, a sign that the winds of change were stirring. The stage was set, and the final act awaited. I drew strength from a deep well of resolve, bolstered by the land's enduring spirit. The ranch was mine, and I would see it restored to its rightful place, its freedom reclaimed from the clutches of tyranny. For now, I watched, waited, and let the storm gather. A labyrinth of legal documents lay sprawled before me, their sterile pages whispering tales of betrayal under the dim light of my study. The HOA, with its suffocating grip, had made a colossal error. Their attempt to auction off my family's 8,000-acre sanctuary without permission was more than a mere oversight. It was an unforgivable transgression, but I was not one for hysteria or rash decisions. No, my path was one of quiet resolve. The first step was to document everything meticulously, a habit ingrained in me from years managing the ranch. Every letter, every email, preserved like ancient relics. The ink on paper felt like a form of justice, a testament to their arrogance and my impending retribution. I knew my adversaries were not faceless villains, but neighbors who had once shared pleasantries over picket fences. Yet, in their desire for control, they had forgotten the power of patience and precision. Days blended into nights as I prepared my case. I was methodical, examining every clause, every loophole. My attorney, a sharp-witted woman with a mind like a steel trap, found the Achilles heel of their fabricated claims. It was buried beneath a mountain of bureaucratic jargon. But it was there, nonetheless. The irony wasn't lost on me, a single misplaced signature, the seed of their downfall. In those weeks, the ranch mirrored my internal struggle. The rolling fields, once vibrant, now lay under a wintry shroud, their stillness a mirror to my own. The cattle, oblivious to the unfolding drama, grazed with a calm certainty, their rhythm a reminder of life's simple truths. Nature, in its unassuming wisdom, became my solace. The HOA, meanwhile, hummed with activity. Their meetings, once mundane affairs, now echoed with a tense energy. I attended each one, my presence as unwelcome as a hawk among sparrows. They avoided my gaze, knowing the reckoning that lay ahead. Yet I played my part, well, subdued, almost conciliatory. It was a dance of diplomacy, a display of restraint that masked the storm gathering within. Then came the day of reckoning, in the courthouse. The air was thick with expectation. The board members huddled together, their confidence wavering under the harsh fluorescent lights. As proceedings began, my attorney laid out our case with surgical precision. Each word was a scalpel, slicing through their defenses, revealing the rot beneath their polished exteriors. It was in a single exchange a question, an answer that the tide turned irrevocably. The silence that followed was a tangible force, pressing down upon them with the weight of their hubris. The judge's gavel was the final punctuation, marking the end of their deception and the beginning of my victory. Outside, the sun broke through the overcast sky, casting long shadows across the courthouse steps. The irony was palpable. They had tried to take my home, only to lose their own. As I walked away, the distant mountains stood resolute against the horizon, guardians of the land that was rightfully mine. In the aftermath, I found myself back on the ranch. Its vastness an eternal expanse of possibility. The HOA had underestimated me, but more so, they had underestimated the power of quiet determination. As I looked out over the fields, a sense of peace settled within. Revenge, it seemed, was best served not in the heat of anger, but in the cool, calculated unveiling of truth. The morning air had an edge to it, a slight coolness that hinted at the approaching autumn, crisp and quiet, like the lull before a storm. I stood at the edge of the vast, sprawling fields, my fields, taking in the sight of my land. The ranch stretched out in all directions, a sea of golden grass undulating beneath the faint breeze. It was a living tapestry, woven with the diligence of generations past and my own stubborn resolve. The HOA had tried to reduce it to mere square footage, but this was so much more. It was legacy and lifeblood. The news of my lawsuit spread slowly at first, a whisper carried on the wind, snickering through the gated community. It tickled ears, causing brows to furrow over breakfast tables and heads to tilt together in hushed conversation during afternoon strolls. They knew something was amiss, a disturbance in their meticulously crafted order. It was my neighbors who noticed first, their gazes lingering a little too long over picket fences, curiosity mingling with apprehension. They were drawn to the commotion like moths to a flame, unable to resist the pull of scandal and the promise of spectacle. Some watched from afar, satisfaction creasing their lips as if my defiance aligned with some unspoken wish for rebellion. Others clung tighter to their strips of manicured law, suspicious and wary, pretending not to look, but always looking. The HOA board members were less subtle. They maneuvered through the neighborhood with the gracelessness of cornered beasts, their faces masks of brittle smiles and restless eyes. I could feel their discomfort, a tangible buzz in the air, as if they were perpetually on the verge of spilling their tea. I knew they feared me, or perhaps it was what I represented, a challenge to their dominion. an unsettling reminder that control was as fragile as the paper they tried to bind it with. Rumors trickled back to me, sweet as honey, bitter as wormwood, whispers of meetings held behind closed doors and hastily scribbled notes passed with shaking hands. "It won't hold," they said. "She can't possibly win." Yet beneath their dismissive words lay a tremor of doubt, a foundation of sand upon which their assumptions rested, eroded by the tide of uncertainty. And then the letters began arriving. Handwritten notes slipped into mailboxes, typed missives stuffed underneath doors. A few were anonymous, scribed with shaky hands and nervous intent. Others bore names I recognized, neighbors who had once nodded politely at me across grocery aisles. Some extended offers of solidarity or tales of their own grievances, while others contained veiled threats, words cloaked in civility, yet jagged at the edges. Among them, one letter stood out, its envelope heavier, its paper smoother. The words within were precise and sharp, like daggers dipped in ink. It was from a board member, the tone both conciliatory and condescending, suggesting a meeting, a chance to discuss matters. As if they could rectify this with a handshake and a smile. I let the letter fall from my fingers, watched it drift to the floor like a leaf from a tree, detached and weightless, discuss as though they hadn't already carved a wound into this land, into my life. No, they would not find solace in my compliance. Beneath the veneer of civility, I sensed their desperation, like watching a spider repair a web, meticulous, yet ultimately futile. They were beginning to understand the scope of what they had provoked. It was not merely a legal battle, it was a reckoning. The ranch stood silent behind me, an unwavering witness to the gathering storm, and I, the calm in its eye, prepared to weather whatever came next. The courtroom was quiet, save for the rhythmic hum of the ceiling fan slicing through the stagnant air. I sat at the plaintiff's table, feeling the steady thrum of my heartbeat in my ears. Across the room, a row of polished shoes tapped nervously on the worn floor, a symphony of unease that underscored the morning's proceedings. The judge, a stern woman whose eyes seemed to pierce through the very core of truth, surveyed the room with an expression that betrayed nothing. Her gavel had yet to sound, but the anticipation was palpable, a heavy fog that settled over every breath drawn within the mahogany-paneled walls. It had been a long road to this moment, a trek through a labyrinth of legalities and paperwork, each step a battle against the arrogance and entitlement embodied by that certain type of HOA, the kind that mistook authority for ownership, the kind that saw my sprawling land not as a home, but as an asset to be manipulated and distributed at their whim. They had underestimated me. That was their first mistake. I let my gaze drift to the window, where the early sunlight filtered through the blinds and painted stripes of gold on the floor. It reminded me of the fields at dawn, the way the light played across the tall, swaying grasses of the ranch. My ranch. The thought brought a fleeting smile to my lips, a small victory in itself. The HOA had been confident, sure that their machinations would remain concealed behind layers of bureaucracy. They hadn't counted on my quiet resolve, nor on the meticulous records I had kept over the years. With each document surrendered into the hands of my attorney, their facade began to crumble. The discovery phase had been particularly revealing. It was almost poetic, the way the truth unraveled from their polished lies like yarn from a cat's plaything. Each meeting, each email, each signed paper they had filed in their favor was another thread pulled loose, unraveling a tapestry woven from greed and deceit. When they realized the weight of the evidence stacked against them, I saw it in their eyes, a flicker of desperation, a tacit admission of defeat. Yet, I remained composed, my expression a placid lake reflecting nothing but serenity internally, though a storm brewed, memories of nights spent poring over legal texts, The sting of betrayal when I first learned of their plot surged through me like electric currents. Finally, the judge spoke, her voice a calm anchor in the tempest of anticipation. Her words were deliberate, each syllable carrying the weight of justice long overdue. As she wove through the legal jargon, the room seemed to shrink around those at the defense table, their confidence dissolving like sugar in the rain. "Judgment is in favor of the plaintiff," she concluded, her gavel descending with finality. The sound was both a release and a beginning. A new chapter unfurled before me, and with it, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that their homes, their prized possessions, would now be auctioned off. It was ironic. Really, the very means they had employed to try and strip me of my home were now the instruments of their downfall. As I left the courtroom, I felt the weight of the victory settle around my shoulders, a cloak of justice not heavy, but empowering. The sunlight was brighter now, a reflection of the relief and vindication that buoyed my steps. The ranch awaited, vast and sprawling under the wide, open sky. It was mine, unclaimed by the small minds that had thought to steal it. As I drove back, the horizon stretched endlessly, a promise that this land would forever remain untamed, just like me. The sun rose sluggishly behind the distant hills, its warm light sprawling across the landscape like a comforting embrace. The air was crisp, hinting at the onset of autumn with its promises of change. As I stood on the porch of my cabin, the wood beneath my feet was rough and familiar, grounding me amidst the chaos that had recently enveloped our community. The ranch had always been a sanctuary of sorts, vast, unyielding, and beautiful in its untamed way. Acres of land that seemed to stretch endlessly, holding secrets beneath every stone and stories in the rustle of every breeze. It was here that the battle had culminated, in the shadow of the very place they tried to take away. Karen, with her ironclad grip on the HOA, had tried to bend the world to her will, but like the brittle leaves that now scattered across the ground, she'd been swept aside by forces she underestimated. The lawsuit had unwound her carefully knit plans, revealing threads of deceit and manipulation. In the end, truth outlasted her lies. In the courtroom, her bravado crumbled like an old cookie under scrutiny, each revelation a blow she hadn't braced for. A few sharp words, like a scalpel, were enough to unravel her empire. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her ambition had led her to believe she could own what could never be tamed. The land and its people were not hers to control. The board, once a fortress of her making, had fallen. The members, previously complicit through silence, now stood in the stark light of accountability. Their homes, once symbols of their authority, were seized a poetic justice for all they had tried to take. I watched as they packed up their lives, the weight of their choices heavy upon them. Karen's departure was unceremonious. I saw her once more, a lone figure against the backdrop of a community she no longer commanded, her once loud presence reduced to the whisper of a car engine fading into the distance. With her gone, the neighborhood slowly began to stitch itself back together, bonds reforged in the shared relief of her absence. The air felt lighter, like a storm had passed, leaving behind the kind of calm that makes you appreciate even the smallest moments of peace. I walked the perimeter of my land, my presence, a silent promise to protect what had been nearly lost. The ranch was more than just land. It was an unyielding testament to resilience. Each corner held memories, built over generations, now preserved for those yet to come. The community gathered one evening, under the wide expanse of sky that bridged us together. No words needed, just silent acknowledgments, a nod here, a gentle smile there, a quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful victories are those fought not with weapons, but with patience and truth. And so the ranch stood, steadfast and eternal, a reminder of what could not be taken, a monument to the enduring spirit of those who refused to be silenced. Here, in the quiet embrace of the land, we found our voices once more. In the end, it wasn't just a victory over Karen. It was a reclamation of community, a restoration of balance, and as I looked out across the land, I felt the echoes of the past settle into the earth, grounding us all in the shared promise of a future we would build together.